to start us off, why don't you each share what you're doing today and a couple of quick key points that helped you get where you are. And we can start with you, Jimena.
Well, sit on. Can you hear me? Yes. I right now lead the global expansion for Intuit, and I'm also the CEO and president of Intuit Payments. Nothing that I had done would have allowed me to think that I would have these jobs. I, in fact, grew up in Mexico, where I was a 3-time ice skating national champion. Then I went to Europe, where I went for college, and I started my career in logistics, meaning transportation. Then I went into consulting, started in tech, and then I came to the US really with that consumer tech dream. Ever since I worked at Facebook, Meetup, Eventbrite, I was the chief product officer of OkCupid, and then I landed in this job. So I'll tell you all about those crazy transitions.
Thank you. Elizabeth?
So I'm Elizabeth. I'm the CEO of Wikihow. I started off as an engineer because I fell in love with programming in college. After college, I did programming and user experience at Apple for 4 years, at which point I realized that I wanted to be more than an engineer as I looked to the future. So I left Apple and I went to business school and got an education in being a little bit less introverted and in leadership and business. And I returned out of business school to Yahoo as a product manager, where I eventually became the product management lead for Yahoo Answers. And eventually through a connection, I came across a very small little company about 10 years ago called Wikihow, where I worked as the COO and president for 9 years, and a year ago I became the CEO of Wikihow.
Nice. Shri?
So I'm a partner at Spero Ventures, and Spero is a $100 million venture fund focused on investing in the things that make life worth living. So we invest in mission-driven founders who want to build venture-scale businesses. I had kind of a circuitous route to get there. I started in product way back in '99, and then I ran all of global product for eBay for a number of years, which is where I met my wonderful colleague Ha. And then I actually ended up going to film school at NYU. I went to grad film at NYU, made some films, directed some Oscar-nominated actors, and then came back to tech when I helped Pierre Omidyar start First Look Media. And then ended up in venture at Omidyar Network, and we spun out Spero earlier this year. So that's my story.
Awesome. So I should tell you all who I am. I'm Sarah Bernard. I got started in customer service and operations roles and led into product after being the GM of an e-commerce site here in San Francisco. And then that kicked off a 15-year product career. And then most recently, I became the COO of CrisisTextLine, which is a nonprofit that does crisis counseling via text message. So we're very interested in the data that we can use to provide a better service in mental health and learn about mental health and crisis counseling via data. And the COO experience, I recommend it highly after product. Okay, so let's get started with, why don't you each share a couple of key moments or decisions or points in your career that were pivotal that helped you get to where you are and the levels that you're at. And any of you can start as you wish.
Okay, I'll start. So I think there were a few key pieces of advice I got along the way that were really pivotal for me. The first one, when I was at eBay, I was assigned a mentor who happened to be the president of eBay at the time, Maynard Webb. He's subsequently been the president chairman of the board at Yahoo. And he said to me, always take the hardest job that's in front of you. Always choose the hardest option. And the way he explained it was, he said, you know, you may fail, but then most people would fail. But if you succeed at the hardest option in front of you, you're one of the few people who could have done that. And so I've given this advice actually to multiple people as they've thought about which options to take. And I've always tried to follow it myself. It often puts you in very uncomfortable positions, but I think it also makes you grow significantly. So that was one pivotal moment. The other piece of advice, or that I don't know if I got it from someone or I gave myself, is take risk. And it could be from small ways to large ways. Right? One thing is speak up. We often have ideas, and in your head you're going, is this really stupid or is this really smart? It's one of the two, but I don't know which one it is, right? And I remember back at eBay again, I was in a room, I was a director at the time, I was selling product management, and I was in the room full of exec staff. And I followed that advice, and I spoke up. I don't even remember what I said, but I remember where I was and everyone else. And our general counsel looked at me, paused, and said, "That is the stupidest thing I've ever heard." And I was like, okay. And then everyone moved on, and I kind of forced myself to say something else later in that meeting. And I will tell you, no one there remembers it, except for me. Right? No one remembers the meeting, no one remembers that he said that, but it was such a moment for me. And what I learned was, yeah, you will make mistakes, right? Taking risk means you will make mistakes. And someone may call you out on it, but so what? Like, what happens, right? Like, nothing happened. There's lots of other things that you do that are the positives that come from taking that risk. And then the third point that I'll make is kind of associated with risk is life is an adventure, but be smart, right? So one of the things I did was I left eBay and decided to go and be a filmmaker. Now, being a visual artist was something I'd always wanted to do since I was a child. I didn't know the term visual artist, but I decided, okay, I'm going to go do it. And it was great, but I failed at that adventure in the sense that I didn't stay a filmmaker. The realities of filmmaking, how long it takes, how much you wait, how little you get paid, are all things I had not thought through. And then trying to come back was really hard. And as I mentioned to these ladies earlier, you know, I was coming back into tech, and I faced people who were like, well, you've been gone 4 years. Do you want an individual contributor role? Or, you know, I faced a lot of comments that I don't think would have been made to my male counterparts who'd had similar experience of, you know, running global product, right? All of it. And so I would say we all have parts of ourselves that we want to explore, but do it in a way that you don't leave the table. Because we need women in tech, we need women in product, and so your voice is important. And don't remove yourself entirely, because it's harder to come back than you think. It is possible, but be smart about your adventures. And finally, I'd say have perspective, right? About why we're here and what we're doing. I was supposed to be at the Women in Product Conference last year. I was on a panel about VCs. But about a month before, I was diagnosed with breast cancer. And the day I was supposed to be on the panel was after chemo, and I ended up in the ER instead. And so I'm here this year. I'm really glad to be here. But those kind of moments put your life in perspective. And we often forget those moments, right? We get back into the grind. And I often wish I could just bottle some of those moments and say, like, what's important? And I will say, being here, this is an amazing conference. I have never felt this kind of positive energy, support, vulnerability in a conference before. And so I want to thank all the organizers and all of you for making it just so incredible.
That's awesome. So Jimena, you talked a lot at the beginning of the week about keeping things in perspective and the way that you use that to manage your career. Do you want to share some of that?
Yes, I think it really resonates with me what Shri just talked about in terms of where the decisions come from and how do we stop feeling fear. I remember that when I started my product career, I was almost like that really good student that was like, I must do this thing, I must work all of these hours. And I was almost afraid of failing towards in the eyes of someone else. And one day I was like, why am I working like that? I'm so employable, not because even if it's just for the number of hours that I put in and just like all of the professionalism that I have in me, it's gonna work out. So from now on, I need to stop coming from a place of fear of me me like feeling like my job is something that could go away, and being like, no, it's me, the one who's a really precious and valuable asset to this company. And that really changed almost. It didn't change anything in the relationship with others. It was in my mind that I all of a sudden was much more powerful. And now to the long term, I actually have a post-it in my desk that says, I'm 38 now. And it says, in this case, it was 47, think long term. So whenever there's a decision in the company or something where I'm getting really upset about something, I'm like, wait a second, how important is this? Like, is it really something that I care about, that I really need to work on now? Or is this something that I'm going to think about tonight and then perhaps write an email tomorrow? So I think I have more of that sense of heaviness, or more of reliability on myself, and knowing that my life and my career is the next 10 years and the next 20 years, and that everything that I do is an accumulation towards it, but that the importance is not this day in the sense of the decisions that are taking, but much more, what am I learning and where am I heading?
Nice. The way that you talk about your career really sounds like you're product managing. Really nice to hear. And Elizabeth, you have talked about different types of advice that you like to give that you used for yourself, I'm sure.
Yes, so when I graduated from business school, I joined a team at Yahoo along with one of my classmates from business school. And we were on a team of many product managers. I think it was like 10 or 12 at the time. And I noticed that he was actually going and trying to like advocate so that he could have like the sexiest piece of the product to work on, and always wanted to work on the thing that I think he thought would get him the most attention or the most meetings with the most executives. And I had a very different strategy. My strategy was to just start doing all the things that nobody else wanted to do. So I started running the Scrum meetings. I took over the bug queues. I started answering the questions that no other product manager was around to ask. And what ended up happening is our boss left. And they were looking around trying to figure out who should step up to run the project. And it wasn't the people that had necessarily worked on the sexiest pieces. It was me, because I had built a lot of power by having intimate knowledge of many different pieces of what we were doing in a way that you couldn't if you were just trying to work on the sexiest piece of something. And so my advice, or one of my pieces of career advice, is to just go into a job and don't think that someone else should have to do the things that no one is doing. Do them and see where that takes you. The adventure of taking on the tasks that no one else wants to do might end up serving your career very, very well. My second piece of advice, and this one takes a little bit of navigating, but it's really, really important to work for someone who supports you. I think that as I look back and think about my career path and the different things that have happened to me, I feel really, really lucky that I had about 3 different bosses, who are all male actually, that really, really believed in me and supported me and lifted me up as they also went up. There was a point in my career at one of the big companies that I worked at where they brought in a new VP/boss, and he basically did not like our product and did not like our team. And I was very, very careful to get myself out of that situation because I didn't see my path to growth without someone above me mentoring and supporting and believing in me. And so I know those situations can be very difficult, but if there's a way to navigate out of a situation where your boss is not trying to help you grow, I would say that your career is more likely to take on a better path. And then the last thing is more of an anecdote and just sort of explaining how my career went from PM to COO. I was working at a really, really big company, and the SVP at the time offered to have a meeting with me. And so I go into this meeting and I was like, hey, what's the path to my next promotion gonna look like? And she drew me this picture. It was a y-axis and an x-axis. On the x-axis was basically my performance as a product manager. And on the y-axis, she wrote down social capital. And she took her pen and she put a little X on the end of the x-axis with absolutely none of the y-axis. Just remember, I'm an introvert, I'm an engineer, I'm a little quirky. I don't do politics. And she basically said, if you want a promotion, you're gonna have to build your social capital. And I thought to myself, wow, if I come to work every day, not just wanting to build a great product, but also needing to expend a lot of energy to build social capital, I'm not gonna be really, really satisfied. And I realized that, and I had been at all big companies up until that point, that maybe this path I had thought I was on to really keep rising up at a big company wasn't gonna work for me, like the real person that I was. So several months later, I got an email about a job at a very, very small company. So I went from tens of thousands of people to a company of 4, which was rather risky. I was also pregnant at the time, for a COO role. And I actually remember searching the internet to try to find out what COO meant. But I took the job. And I didn't know what it was, so I just started doing everything, like I mentioned before. And I just picked up all the pieces. So I did product management, I managed the engineers, I figured out the payroll, I got us benefits. And we started to build, this is Wikihow, and we started to build this company and this website with this mission of helping teach people how to do things, which is very near and dear to my heart. And I didn't need to work on building social capital. And it was so empowering for me, and why I've done this now for 10 years, to be somewhere in a role where I feel like I'm very, very productive and that my job is aligned with who I am as a person, and not to be chasing something based on the structures of a big company, based on what they believe you need to do to build your career path.
Awesome. So I'm struck, it was great to see, I think it was Amanda this morning, talk about Angela Duckworth. I think that was Amanda. She wrote Grit, and her theory is that in addition to having a growth mindset, people need this combination of perseverance and passion. And that is what she calls grit. And grit is what truly leads to success. And I was struck so clearly in our conversations that all of you showed that perseverance in particular throughout different stages of your career. So can you share some of the ways that you think you've applied that? And what gave you, Jimena, I think you asked the question, where did you get it in yourself to have that kind of confidence or thick skin that it takes to just keep going back and having that confidence?
So I'll start from a personal part. In ice skating, for your body to understand how to rotate in the air, it needs to try and fall down. So whenever you start a jump, it's 100% for sure that you're going to fall down, but you need to do it so many times that at some point your muscles just know what to do at the right time. And then one day, after 1,000 tries, you're not going to fall down, but each single time you go, you're like, this one is the one I'm really going to land on my feet. So I think that was kind of a catalyst to saying that careers really, from here, they look like glamorous, they look like titles, but there's so many times when all of us have been sitting in our sofas, crying and eating chocolate or ice cream and thinking, this sucks, what am I doing? And the thing is, really what I've learned with the more my career evolves is that you brush things off and you start learning models. For me, it's the long term. I used to be someone that I believed that my core power was that I could make things happen very quickly and I could react. And I learned over time that it made me be much more impulsive or almost more in the moment, and I made things have more importance than they really had. So now I've learned that the best way in which I can be much more resilient is that I step back and I think about how important is this, and is this a fight that I'm going to fight today? That was moment number one. The other one is that you stop thinking or taking things as personally. I remember that when Trump was coming up in power, I don't want to go into politics, but I started thinking, man, I have an accent. And I was the representative, the person that took all of the interviews for OkCupid. And I was thinking, is this bad now? Are they going to choose someone else that doesn't have an accent? And then I started speaking less and being much more self-conscious of where I came from. And I realized that what had made me be who I was the fact that I'm this Mexican lady with an accent, and I had come with all of these other things. So I learned that I needed to also not self-bias in a way that would actually stop me from being who I am. And the final part is that aspect of what you brush off. And perhaps there's people that along my career have thought that perhaps I'm, not the right leader that they think of when they match me to what usual leaders look like. And that is okay, because my path is my own path. And related to mentors, I've also used my own product management skills to write my models of like, what do I care about right now? How do I describe it? And then I rank my role to say, how does that relate to the things that I care about? So I'll write 50% learning. How is my role right now? And then I'll take calls and I'll compare it. And that's how sometimes career advancement goes from supply and demand. Perhaps supply actually tells you, hey, you've grown up. You can do much more than what you currently are doing, and your company might even know.
Nice. Elizabeth?
Grit and perseverance.
You had some great strategies.
Yeah, I have a couple stories.
How you dealt with the added complexity and taking on more and more.
Yeah. So as you rise up in your career, a few things happen. You have to start making decisions with less and less information and believing and you need to have confidence in those decisions. Another thing that happens that was a little bit of a surprise to me is, so as a leader, you have, and we do this as product managers, you have to go to work with a smile on your face, say hello to everybody. It doesn't matter sort of what's going on in your personal life or what happened to you this morning. You're the leader. You're there to lead the team towards the direction that they need to go in. But something I've discovered is such is not the same necessarily with the non-leaders at the company. And so throughout my day, I find myself sometimes navigating a lot of different moods and emotions and stubbornness and personality characteristics of a lot of different people that aren't necessarily as motivated as I am to see things through in a smooth manner. And so the thing that we were talking about is I have developed, and it's something you have to practice, a very good ability at compartmentalizing. So if I think about my day as this like emotional roller coaster dealing with all these different people, if I have a situation or a meeting with someone that is very, very difficult or very, very hard, I sort of put it in a box in my mind and put it in the corner so that when I go to the next meeting for the next person, that I'm very, very fresh and happy and that thing isn't pulling me down and pulling down the situation for the whole team. So compartmentalizing has been really, really important to me. And then there's another story that I wanted to tell. I was telling this at lunch as well. When I became CEO, I was telling my friends a few months later, I was like, now that I'm CEO, more people want to talk to me. And isn't that stereotypical? Isn't that bad? Like that a title would make people more interested in you? And they're like, that's weird, and kind of ignored me or whatever. And but then I stopped telling people I was CEO, and they were still treating me the same, which was different than how they were treating me from before I had this title. And what I've realized and what I want to pass along to you is that I think we need to, as women and as leaders, show confidence in our body language, in how we hold our heads and our eye contact. I realized it was the fact that the title had given me confidence was why people were treating me differently. It wasn't actually the title. And you don't need the title to become confident. And if you're confident, a lot of more opportunities will open themselves up to you. And so my advice around this is to sort of maybe even fake it if you have to. Fake it till you make it. Hold your head high, be confident, and opportunities will open themselves up because you have your head high.
That's great. We have good time. We were ahead of schedule, so.
So Grit, I come from a line of very strong women in terms of my grandmother and my mother, and I feel like my life is a cakewalk compared to theirs, so I try to make them proud. And I think, for me, a lot of grit and perseverance comes from purpose and what am I doing. So, I've been lucky in many ways to work at companies where I feel what I do matters. At eBay, there were the millions of customers. We interacted with many of them. And so there was real purpose about why am I doing what I'm doing, even if we were working 18 hours or sleeping in conference rooms or whatever the case may be. And, in coming back, right, when I was coming back, I was telling Sarah and the ladies up here, it was really challenging because for the first time I felt ageism, I felt sexism. I wasn't in a position where I had a title, to your point, and where people treated me as just this person they didn't know, right? And it was one of those things where I had to have a lot of confidence in myself and figure out what mattered. I was in an interview for a COO role, and I remember thinking, I really don't want to work at this company because I don't understand the purpose of it, the mission of it does not drive me. So I dramatically narrowed my search. And once I did that, and once I said, I'm actually choosing here. It's not, you're not picking me, please pick me, please pick me. I actually have agency. I'm going to make this work. And I want somewhere where every morning I come in and I'm excited to go to work. And no one here is going to, the world at large, the tech bros aren't going to tell me what my career path is going to be. That kind of helped get over that. But it was difficult, Yeah. Silicon Valley in 2012, where 25-year-olds were saying, oh, wait, you're not going to stay here till 11 p.m.? What do you mean you're going to go have dinner with your children and then get back to work? I was like, yep, that's what I'm going to do. So I'd say, figure out what's most important to you, and don't let anyone get in your way.
I loved what you said last night at dinner about, so fine, maybe they'll fire me if I do this.
Yeah.
And just not worrying so much about
what
all the implications could be if something went wrong.
Yeah, at every job I've always thought, okay, I'm going to speak my mind. They pay me for my opinion, right? They pay me for my opinion, my mind, and what I can get accomplished. So I'm going to give it to them. I'm super direct. And I always say, well, what's the worst that could happen? They'll fire me, right? And that's not so bad because there are so many opportunities in the world. And so when you kind of put it in such stark terms, you're like, oh, like the worst that can happen is not that bad, so let's go.